welcome to this afternoon's debate, A Wine for All Reasons, Why German Wine is the Smart Choice. This is the closing session of this year's virtual Big G activities run by Wines of Germany in partnership with Harpers. I know that some of you caught the excellent tasting masterclasses yesterday. We had David Motion of the winery and Ronan and Sayburn of 67 Palmer heading up on and off trade sessions respectively, off and on trade sessions respectively. I have to get the right way around. And some really, really cracking wines actually across the spectrum from Germany style-wise. We've also been streaming an In My Vineyard video since this morning, featuring 4 virtual tours with 4 notable and quite different leading German winemakers. And there's a link to that up on Harper's news page today, so harpers.co.uk. They're very concise, and I think they're very good, and it's worth tuning in sort of 15 odd minutes of your time to catch up with those winemakers. Okay, so back to this panel discussion. I should say I'm Andrew Catchpole, editor of Harpers, and I'm joined by a great panel, all of whom have varied but strong experience, and I suspect views, as to how best to make the most of a German portfolio or offer. So I'd like to welcome Eliot Awin, partner at ABS Wine Agencies. Hi, Eliot. Colin Thorne, buyer at the ever innovative Vagabond Wines. Hi. Anna Sapungiu, MW, who's head by Venus Ultimata, which is Oddbins, and Ruth Spivey, who's a consultant across various things actually. The wine show being one of the most prominent, and first became known for that great initiative that is Wine Car Boot. So hi, Ruth. And right, I'm going to be inviting all to share their experiences of selling German wines, both in the trade and to consumers, to relate what works, why and how it works, to try and get a fuller understanding of how best to maximize engagement with and returns from the category. Before we begin, just a quick word, and I want to get into the panel soon, on Wines of Germany's marketing straplines for 2021 and 2022. As I think they say quite a lot about the modern image this country's producers are keen to portray. So 2021 memory has been coolest wines on earth, while 2022 will be a wine for all reasons, hence the title for this debate. And if you kind of try and relate that, switch the focus to the UK today, and plenty of wine drinkers, especially younger and up and coming wine drinkers, and I think this is fairly well documented, are looking for premium, they're looking for individuality, they're looking for true value for money, not cheap. They're looking for fresher, cool climate styles, food compatibility, and perhaps most importantly, personalities and stories behind the wines they choose. And for me, at least, that pretty much aligns with my perception of what's offered by German wines. One more word from me on a slightly somber note. I think we must also mention today the Our region, where, as you'll be aware, the terrible recent floodings impacted on so many. And I believe Rian, who I forgot to introduce actually, Rian Rosser and Caroline Tanner from the Wines of Germany team are behind the scenes, helping out and helping us stay on track. I think Rian will be putting up some details in the chat function as to how you can donate if you wish to sort of help out disaster hit producers there. And I know the trade, many in the trade have already rallied round actually, so which is heartening to see. Okay, so on a more upbeat note, enough from me, time to hear from our patient panel. And we'd also love for this to be as interactive as possible to involve you, the audience. So if you can pose questions through the Q&A function, and we'll endeavour to answer some where they're really relevant as we go along, some at the end possibly, and those that we perhaps can't get to, we will certainly endeavour to send through answers by email. So here we go. So I'd like to begin, panel, perhaps just in brief, a couple of lines, if you can. Maybe we'll begin with you, Eliot, with a simple question. Why do you personally like German wines? What excites you about Germany?
Well, you've actually already mentioned one adjective is the individuality. The individuality of the way that German wines can portray a sense of place almost better than anywhere else, I would say, in the world for one great variety. So I think a lot of consumers are looking for that to separate and understand differences between different styles of wine, and therefore I think Riesling and the dominance of Riesling grown on different terroir really can help people look at the way a great variety can change with its sense of place. As well as of course, Spätburgunder, Pinot Noir, and just having this innate purity, and every winemaker at a certain level having this fantastic attention to detail, that creates the purity in the wines and such a individuality.
So Riesling is this sort of wonderful prism or window onto the terroir, really, which and then the diversity of Germany. It has diverse styles and varieties, but also bang within Riesling itself. Yeah, what an excellent calling card for a country to have. Who'd like to go next? Ruth, what floats your boat with Germany?
I think I'd probably say, I hope this doesn't disqualify me from being on the panel, I'm probably the least experienced of German wines on the panel, but for me, therefore, it's the sort of undiscovered, and it feels to me like my sort of instinct is that, the country, apart from, there is, which I think we've largely shook off the sort of bad sweet Riesling reputation from the sort of 70s and 80s, the Liebfrau Milch sort of thing. But I think it's the undiscovered potential for a lot of consumers of Germany. Germany's discovered their potential, has its potential, is maximising it. But I think for, there's, and you can get a broad range of German wines here, but I think there's still a lot for the consumers to discover as well. And, I wholeheartedly agree with Eliot about, how great Riesling is and its variety and a sort of lens across terroir. But there are all the other great varieties as well, and I like the fact you don't see them, although it would be a lot easier if you saw lots of all the different varieties in both the supermarkets and independent shops, just for ease of access. But I think the fact that it hasn't sort of been bastardized all over the supermarket like maybe Chilean Merlot or Chilean Pinot or New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc is a real sort of like is a good thing. It does add a little bit more, you need to sort of like search them out a little bit more, but I think it gives independent shops a lot of potential as well. And it's we've seen what's happened to Austrian wine in the last, or certainly, I mean, maybe I'm not, certainly in London, Austrian wine in the last 5 to 7 years has become very sort of hip and popular. And 10 years ago, when I started working in wine about 10 years ago professionally, no one really drank much Austrian wine, and now it's much more commonplace. So I think, the potential of German wine, the value of it as well. I mean, everyone moans about Burgundy, Pinot being too expensive, obviously for perfectly valid reasons, because of the land cost and whatever. But I think there's great value, great quality, and a lot of things to discover from a consumer point of view, which makes it really exciting.
Yeah. No, it's I think you make a really good point, actually, that maybe it's a good time to explore it further, that I think for many consumers, and I might have mentioned at the beginning, sort of, especially for sort of younger people and people that are really getting into wine, that Germany really is a blank slate. I mean, you have to be kind of more my age, I think, to remember some of those challenges from the past. I'll put it that way politely. Yeah, everything you said. I mean, Colin, what's your take on that with your Vagabond customers? Is Germany a blank slate if we think more generally? I mean, you're obviously attracting more wine savvy people because of the very nature of Vagabond in your setup. But what do you say about that blank slate?
There is definitely some of that. It's a broad canvas with our clientele, with our guests. They certainly at the younger end of the spectrum, Germany is perhaps a surprise for some people who are not used to seeing wines from Germany, and so come at it completely fresh and without any preconceptions. I think the key thing that the wines have for all of our guests, though, is that they have this direct and impactful flavour without feeling like they're cluttered or heavy. There's a freshness and a briskness in the wines, which is really, just so much about drinkability. And to borrow the old Spurrier phrase, value for pleasure, I think is the way that I'd probably characterise them. And it's kind of the thing that I suppose when I got into these wines, it was because they were the underdogs in a way. I'm a perpetual underdog champion. So, now Wines of Germany have done such amazing campaigns for the last 10 years. I'm getting a little bit like, Germany is going a bit overground now for me, But, I'll still be here. I'll still be drinking it. So, I just love that kind of, uncluttered, Marie Kondo'd kind of flavour profile. And I think that captures some of what I hope our guests enjoy as well in these wines.
Yeah, I really like the way you put it there. That's sort of impactful, but without treading really heavily all over your palate. Just to slightly paraphrase as you dipped out. I think that sort of sums up for me really well. If I had to do an overarching kind of, what's Germany all about? How does it deliver? I guess this might get more difficult as it goes around. Anna, just do you have any sort of what draws you to Germany? What are the high points for you? And also, if I could throw in that, how much of a blank slate is it to say Oddbins customers, who I guess in profile, I don't know, might overlap with well, of course there's going to be some overlap, but might be similarly minded at the core to Vagabond customers. I don't know.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, our Oddbins story with Germany started a few years back when I went to Provine, and I was so amazed by the winemakers and the vibe in the Germany room. Obviously, it was huge, but it's just something about the winemakers and the dynamic of the room that really kind of got me really passionate about it. And I remember going back into the office the next day and said, right, we're getting behind Germany. So this is, a few years back. And we started engaging with the consumers, bringing a proper breadth of the range. I think, you really do need to bring in enough wines to make an impact. And we put all our efforts for a year, and then every year we kind of added all more to the range. And I've got to say, it's the people. Yes, I agree with everything about the Riesling and other things that we all know, but I think there's something with people as well, which is really interesting and engaging with them. The only thing I would add is, in terms of people, is we had a buying trip a couple of years back where our buyer went with managers from our branches there, and again they came back so enthused. And on the back of that trip, we've brought in some new listings, and we've been selling some really interesting wines to customers.
And realistically, how well does Germany perform against? I mean, what would be its rival categories? You assess sort of how well it
Yeah, I think realistically, people don't know an awful lot apart from Riesling, and they still have in their mind, is it sweet or whatever. But you do need to constantly explain and engage with them. And I think because Wines of Germany is doing a lot of consumer activities, and we've worked with them as well, I think it's starting to show. So I think education is important, and we need to keep at it.
So it's still quite sort of early days in one sense, that it's very Riesling centric, Riesling focused. I mean, again, swinging back to Vagabond, do you have Colin, a similar story there? I mean, how well does it perform alongside of the other sort of categories of wine on your shelves and in your enomatic machines and so on?
It's interesting. I think a lot has probably to do with its presentation. I think people still buy by looking at labels as much as they do by thinking about places and grape varieties, and winemaking perhaps as a sense of environmental sustainability might be a creeping aspect in people's choices as well. We've wines with strong presentations have always done well. So the wines that Graft have, I'm forgetting the name of the producer, but the if you're a racist and asshole kind of label that I'm forgetting the name of the wine. I was trying to remember it earlier, and all I could remember.
I think it's
but it's not that.
Emil Bauer. Is it the Emil Bauer wines?
Yes. Yes,
I could look very clever, but I just had a prompt in chat on that, so it wasn't.
Yes,
it was Rihanna wines from Germany.
Yeah, so those wines have always jumped off the shelf because they're perhaps they don't scream Germany at people. They scream, that's an interesting wine and it's got something to say for itself. And then on the other hand, I really love, and I think they still do really well, is the super ultra traditional flowery Mosel labels. Your Max Ferd Richters and Merkelbachs and things like that, which I think there's a sort of sense of long-termism about them that feels quite dependable, and you kind of know where you're going with those, I think, for a lot of people.
And that's not old kind of red corduroy types coming in who are 132 who grew up with those wines first time round. This will be a general normal Vagabond customer walking in and actually liking, in maybe some sort of retro kind of way, the the feeling of sort of tradition and so on. Would that be your sense? Or
yeah, absolutely, yeah. In the same way that a red Burgundy with a the sort of the Bon Mar Musini kind of labels, Monk's handwriting kind of approach is has its own fan base.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Ruth, do you have anything to add to that in terms of, I don't know how much you've worked with Germany, and you said perhaps of the panel you're the least expert in terms of German wines, but you've always come at wine from quite a refreshing kind of angle, as others have around this virtual table. Does any of this sort of resonate? What do you see as being the stronger points that you would push Germany?
I mean, I think definitely, like, obviously, I mean, it's not for all the varieties in Germany, but the classic Riesling bottle is something that's also very recognizable. And just to go on from what Colin was saying about the labels, you've got the sort of new wave labels which don't look German, and then you've got the ones, and like, is it Knoll labels, I think, or some of them, that are very sort of gothic and kind of like properly old school. But I think it's possible for the same consumer to like both of those. There's a place for all labels, and you don't have to. I think that's what's it's one thing I love about wine. You can like the sort of modern label that's all a bit punk with swear words on, and also have an appreciation at the same time for something classic, something good. It will stand the test of time, whether it's contemporary or or classic. But I think something, and the sort of like that sort of freshness impact with freshness combined is really key. And I was thinking something that I think German wines broadly, they're very good food wines as well because of that. They've got that sort of linear purity, but also the sort of lightness and freshness that you can drink, sort of several bottles over a meal without getting knocked out. And but I mean, by no means doing down on German cuisine, but I can't think of a German restaurant off the top of my head in London anyway. I don't think I've been to a German restaurant outside of Germany. And it's just funny how, obviously in, other countries, you sort of think, the sort of traditional thing, you drink the wine from the region with the food from the region, and French wine goes with French food, Spanish wine and Spanish food. But I think, German wine kind of transcends all cuisines as well. I mean, it's a sort of classic pairing, obviously, with Riesling and maybe sort of Asian food or spicier foods and fuller fragrance foods. But I think, it's maybe one country where, you don't have to go, oh, I haven't got a German restaurant to go to. They're really flexible wines as well, and for drinking on their own or during the day, like I am now. So like that sort of they can sort of break a lot of boundaries like that. You don't have to be like, oh, I've got to eat this certain dish with this food, with this wine. So
I mean, I think that's really good points, actually. But so on the one hand, you've got these wines that can be incredibly flexible with food, and we were looking at Burgunder we looked at yesterday, a Grauburgunder, and possibly, obviously, the selection of Rieslings in both Ronan and David's tasting masterclasses. It was general agreement that from those tasting that there would be fantastic food pairing possibilities that were really broad across a range of dishes, especially with the Rieslings, you say, from Asian to fish to perhaps roast pork, and just this sort of amazing kind of medley of things that you could perceive these wines going with. But on the other hand, as you highlighted, Ruth, I think you don't have, and there's German gymnasium, isn't what I'm trying to think, but yeah, you don't have that German restaurant base against which to set it. And also, I'm going to be in real trouble for saying this. There are fantastic restaurants in Germany, but there are also a lot of very, very traditional restaurants that I've been taken to. So I'm not sure everyone's got that image. It's kind of a bit like UK food, that people abroad don't necessarily see it as a dynamic food culture until they get to somewhere like London or Manchester or wherever. So Eliot, wanted to come to you and ask, sort of tying into all this. So as an importer, I mean, you obviously do a lot with a lot of great agencies and producers. You're known for Germany along with a lot of other things. What do you find works strongest in the market? Where are the opportunities for Germany at the moment? So where's it strong, and where do you believe it can become stronger?
I was looking at on the little brief, looking at this question, thinking, gosh, where do I start? Because actually, for us, it works from at every level. I mean, if you take a producer like Ernie Lowson, for example, he'll have an entry level in big supermarkets, inexpensive supermarkets, but he'll also have fine wines that will sell to brokers where they're very much more traditional, much more serious, and actually everything in between. And so it's actually a very difficult question to say where does it do well, because it does, as we said, it transcends every sector of the market. But I think in terms of the independent retail trade, it offers that fantastic tool to be able to introduce a wine from so many different styles to each different consumer. So if you wanted something that was light and dry, that's what you can offer and lead someone down that way, or equally a much more sweeter and a richer style. So I think for us, as it does go through every single different sector of the trade, but I think at the moment the on trade is still ripe for a bit more development. So with restaurants that have their wine list as a point of difference rather than a profit center, somewhere where you can talk to someone, talk it through. So one of Dernhoff's cabinets, for example, is in the Fat Duck on the tasting menu, and they say that it's the most requested bottle after the tasting menu. So people order can we order a bottle or another glass of the cabinet? And I think getting liquid on lips is really important, and the on trade pretty much is one of the only places where we can get liquid on lips to be able to promote every aspect of German wines. And so I think getting more people, I think the biggest strength would be, or the biggest opportunity is still very much in the on trade, where people can have conversations with consumers.
Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. So liquid on lips, and you mentioned cabinet at the Fat Duck. Are we then very much the story at the moment for Germany's best foot forward remains drier styles of Riesling, simply, and then obviously there's a sort of subsect of people who are going nuts, pinophiles who are going nuts for German Spätburgunders, Pinot Noirs. Is that a sort of fair summary at the moment, or are we still seeing strength among the?
Yeah, no, there's definitely strength in the variety as well, and actually, the fact that one of the most drunk wines in our portfolio are not Rieslings. They're Weissburgunder, but label Pinot Gris, Grauburgunder label Pinot Gris, Weissburgunder label Pinot Blanc, Spätburgunder label Pinot Noir from the Pfalz, inexpensive but easy to understand, and they're very much sort of bring people into Germany. But I still think, and I think this is one of Germany's biggest strengths, is its dominant, let's stick to what we do best. Riesling is our calling card. It's planted twice the amount of any other grape variety in the country. So let's use that as a calling card. I think if you think of the most successful wine regions, and of course, there are multiple wine regions within Germany, but the most successful wine regions around the world have a very dominant calling card that people can understand. And when you want a Riesling, you go to Germany, or you want a Spätburgunder of great value, you can go to Germany. I think, and then perhaps segue into other grape varieties. And I like the idea of doing it that way around, rather than and then also we can bring people in with Grauburgunder, etc. But I like the idea of this is what, because if you have a shelf in a shop done by style, where would you go and how would you populate the Riesling shelf? It should be from Germany. Whereas if you were doing it by country, you might get a little bit lost and have too many and create too much noise around each country, especially Germany.
Well, maybe let's go back to, because I mean, you said the opportunities mostly, more strongly in the on trade with liquid on lips. Anna, and I think, forgive me, was it you, Anna? One of you guys mentioned earlier about almost like sort of achieving a critical mass for portfolio, rather than having like a couple of token German Rieslings on the shelf so that people can shop around a little bit. But do you think that's the case? What can you do in the off trade to sort of counter the on trade's ability to get liquid on lips and to talk a little bit about it? I mean, surely the point about, well, yeah, what's the story or end? Is it all about the on trade at the moment, or can the indie merchants and Oddbins style merchants still help lead the way with teaching about German wines, perhaps led by Riesling?
Yes, absolutely. I think we are doing our bit, and we all need to do our bit into developing the category. So it's not just about Riesling, absolutely not. What works really well for us, it's actually the Spätburgunder, but it's labeled as Pinot Noir. And that's the top selling SKU for us. And then equally, it's a modern label, dry Riesling, and very interestingly, a Grauburgunder as well. But so the education doesn't stop there. We brought in a natural Riesling also, so we tapped into the natural market, not because it's Riesling, but because it's natural, and we've got all that kind of type of customer coming into the category. And most recently, we brought in an alcohol-free Riesling as well. And that has really surprised me of how well it's done. I don't quite know whether it's because it's Riesling. It's probably because it's it's alcohol free, but it's really interesting of how well it's been doing recently. So yeah, it's on all fronts.
Ruth or Colin, do you have anything to add to that? I mean, I guess, well, Colin, you're straddling both off and on trade. You see. How do the sales and how do you manage sales of Riesling via the two aspects, the two facets of what Vagabond offers?
It's definitely about on-site drinking with Riesling and with German wines. I think in general, they've still not reached that kind of tipping point of kind of brand recognition where something like Chablis or Sancerre might on a white wine, where it just trips off people's lips and is easy to ask for. I think there's still a little more reluctance to come in and request that unless you're really, really hyper confident about what you're buying. It's still on trade. I think if I was really, really, really pushing for an off trade style, I would hammer home Riesling in Magnum because it looks amazing. These things that look like I don't know, like ammo shells that you'd put into World War II guns or something. That they're phenomenal looking things, and people and the overall cost ratio is not all that. Oh, there we are. Thank you. Thank you for that. That's good.
You, Eliot, was going to go and do that. Rustle up a hand.
Great bottle shape. Blue Peter.
I think those are wonderful for capturing people's imagination and really, and they look amazing on display as well. So that's probably something I would really, really love to be able to showcase more.
I think that there's something. I think some consumers might be there's that sort of either confusion or don't really know where to start with German wine. There's not a lot of it easily available, so it's just something people slightly ignore or just don't really they feel a bit lost with it. Or they might think it's a bit old school and staid, whereas actually, I mean, there are a few things more refreshing than a bottle or preferably Magnum of, sort of Cabernet Riesling or something with a tiny little bit of spritz and petillons, ice cold in the garden with nothing else is just delicious. That sort of should be, I mean, I know you also no one wants to pigeonhole wine into just, a seasonal thing because rosé and port sort of suffer from that, but the sort of why people from whenever the sun comes out in March or April, if we're lucky, through till Indian summer, September, October, just have Riesling on ice for the garden 7 days a week. You're not going to go too wrong, and it's amazing value as well. So I think that's it's that aperitif-y, fun garden vibe, which I think also could be a good hook for people to sort of get into. It's like and it is very much it's a drink of its own sort of start. I don't really know what. There's a few things you could sort of go what you could sort of substitute it with, but I think German wines are harder to substitute from other countries, which is a really good thing as well, because you can't just go, just drink this instead. It's I'd take ice cold Riesling over ice cold Sauvignon in the garden. Sorry, I won't be invited to wine to Sauvignon.
No,
just on that, Ruth, I think that is the great thing for me about Riesling is it has notable nuances. If you want to sit and ponder over it for hours, you can. But if you want to smash a few bottles in the garden after, like a hot day around the barbecue, you can also do that. It plays both roles, and which very few, I would think, wines do cover both of those areas.
Mm.
I think you hit it as well. I mean, it's so distinctive. I mean, I guess Sauvignon Blanc is as well, especially the very in-your-face styles. But Riesling's kind of unmistakable and sort of does stand aside, doesn't it? You can't really say, well, you could substitute it for this variety. I mean, you know, so that it's got that individuality as well, which is pretty good. Okay, so Riesling, smashable for breakfast in the garden 7 days a week, and I love that idea. I think it's great as well, Christmas morning, Boxing Day, when you're maybe feeling a tiny bit rusty, so you can just ease in with something slightly lighter in alcohol.
Yeah, something
Maybe
like 10% Riesling, hair of the dog, 10% Riesling breakfast, little pick me up, perfect. Or like at a festival when you're sort of waking up in a sweaty tent, dehydrated from the night before, just get back on the Riesling and you'll be fine. I've heard.
So I'm all for that. I'll off to a festival tomorrow, the day after, I think. So I'll my teenage son. So I'll send him off to Riesling and get him to do some exploratory work on our behalf. But also on a serious note, I know we are making serious points here about the fun you can have with Riesling. It's kind of that great frustration that is I know you are. Is there anyone around here or in the trade or listening that doesn't love Riesling in all its various forms, German and otherwise? And it just seems to be the most impossible thing to sort of communicate and get that passion across because of those lingering suspicions. But then we've talked about it being a bit of a blank slate as well, Germany, for quite a few consumers. So I just trying to find a way through, you know, that's partially why we're here, I suppose, to I'm not saying German wine is doing badly, and I'm not saying Riesling is doing badly, but it should surely be doing much better. I think. I don't know where I'm going with that, but it's maybe
some of it's finding a sort of, I don't know whether Wines of Germany would agree or if it would be aligned with their sort of strategies, but it's sort of finding, because it doesn't have that sort of we don't have that strong German food culture here. Whereas you think of wines like, you know, rosé has a really sort of strong thing. It's summer, drink rosé. Or if you're having Chakali, you know, it's got sort of traditions and things around it. So there are certain times or places or food you're eating that you may go, well, we must drink this with it. This is what we do in the garden. We drink rosé, or we drink Chakali and we pour it from a height. You know, all these things that people sort of love getting into because it sort of brings some tradition with it. And I think, you know, I don't know if the sort of lack of German food culture or lack of German culture here means that, you know, the wines are great and are so serviceable across so many different situations, and like, as Eliot said, can be sort of cerebral and pondered upon, but can just be smashed back and enjoyed. And there's few wines that cover both bases. But people just don't quite know. It's not the first thing people think of, or people aren't, you know, I don't know, maybe we need more German wine parties.
I think it's that approachability and accessibility, and so making it a bit more approachable. So obviously Colin's, and that's what brings the funky people look at funky labels. That makes it a little bit more accessible because you take it home because of its label, you drink it, you think fantastic, Riesling's a very viable option. So it's getting into creating it and making it a little bit more accessible, which is why I think tasting, getting that that liquid on lips is so important. And the number of people who I've served Riesling to at dinner parties who think, no, I don't drink Riesling, and think, was that Riesling? And it's really just continually, relentlessly breaking down misconceptions and getting people to drink and all styles and serving all styles at the same time, so that it becomes that understanding and makes it a little bit more accessible and therefore approachable. And yeah, when they're out looking for the next bottle. Yeah,
actually, Karen Jenkins, hi Karen, has come back with experience-led marketing for Riesling, exclamation mark, which I think is really what we're saying. And then sponsor more German food and wine matching visibility is another point, which I think is great. Obviously, you know, there is activity that goes on, and Wines of Germany are incredibly proactive. But there's never enough money to do everything that we all want, I suppose. But also another point, interesting point that Karen raises, maybe increased profile of German reds will help Riesling, which sort of ties into one of the questions I wanted to ask you all, which is my question as I had it was, does Riesling remain the gateway wine, or is it possible to encourage or draw people into Germany through its other myriad kind of varieties and styles. What's the relationship between Riesling and others, and how helpful is it that Spätburgunder is enjoying its moment and hopefully its ongoing moment in the sun? And I think we know some of the reasons there, because not least the pricing of red Burgundy, or Burgundy generally, I think is turning heads to Germany, and possibly also, shout me down if I'm wrong, anyone, but I think perhaps with global warming as well, I think the quality of German Spätburgunders, there've always been some great wines, but really, really impressive, and we're seeing more of them as well. So it's sort of a self-fulfilling thing, isn't it? So is Riesling a gateway? Does it operate like that? Is that the best way to bring people to German wines in their breadth, or does Germany need a couple of other calling cards? So we've talked about the kind of, Argentina Malbec, New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, Germany Riesling, kind of, putting it on your finest athlete, your fastest horse. So anyone else want to pick up on that?
Well, I think that what you've got is this weird kind of flip in perception between red wine and white wine when it comes to Germany. In that, for a lot of countries, I think a lot of UK consumers would probably think the serious wine is going to be red, and the white wine is kind of just a little more kind of knock it back and don't spend so much time over it. Whereas in Germany, the really serious wines are white. They're it's Riesling with Grand Cru sites and bottle age and things like that, which have get all the acclaim. And perhaps Pinot Noir and Spätburgunder, I should say, being the sort of newcomer to the party, comes in as I don't want to say frivolous, but it comes in as a much more accessible, exciting, and easy to drink sort of style, without having to spend lots of time studying maps to know exactly which vineyard something comes from. So yeah, there's this sort of flip in that way for a lot of people, I think, and I'm all for it. I think Spätburgunder, Pinot Noir, however it's labelled, from Germany. I'm trying to think of if you compare it against Australia or California, there's price wise, value for pleasure, there's no comparison. Perhaps Chile might be the kind of closest competitor, but they're very, very different styles. And the talk of the English Pinot Noir is still the actual number of vines in the ground is some way behind Germany yet. So global warming and climate and stuff has been very beneficial for that variety, and I think clonal research as well has definitely helped too. So I'm all for it. Is my summary. Yeah,
lots of things coming together. Mm-hmm. Anna, do you have anything to add to that from the off-trade side of things?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think on both fronts, Riesling in its diversity of styles, and absolutely to lead with the dry and the modern labels, sparkling, doing really, really well. But and also follow its story all the way to the more accessible price points and very good value all the way to a higher price points. But Pinot Noir, which offers a great introduction to Pinot, really. Label it Pinot Noir is at a more entry price point, and then follow that through again on the price point with the Spätburgunder and more traditional labels. I really do think that's another way into it. And yeah, it's a great alternative to Burgundy and better value at the higher price points. Yeah.
And is that simply, in a way, the best way to sell it? Do you think, if we're brutally honest about it, saying you've got some great Pinot Noirs, just trust me, they're really good value when set against Burgundy and perhaps other places in the world, or is it too early to go in and say you want to discover German Pinots what they are?
I think it's a true. It depends what price point you're looking. So if we're looking at the entry price point, you almost want to introduce people to Pinot Noir. Forget about Burgundy. You're talking to another audience. You're talking to the younger customer that wants to drink Pinot Noir at a price point. And at higher, yes, I think you just have to talk about this is an alternative to Burgundy. I really don't think people are ready to talk about the regions where Spätburgunder comes from or anything else. I think it's good to relate to something that it's safe and they know, and have it from there.
Yeah, sure. Okay, brilliant. Another possibility, I suppose, if you actually look at the overall wine market, and perhaps we rewind to 2019 before things were, should we say, somewhat disrupted. with sparkling wine as a category in growth, one of very few against an otherwise sort of moribund or flat market, I mean declining in fact in the UK. Sect. Does anyone have any success with sect? Maybe Eliot, because you'll probably have the most experience with selling sect into the UK. What's the story there? Is that able to tap into the the growing sparkling wine market?
I think definitely, and I think the only issue with sect is the different styles are quite difficult to understand for the consumer. I mean, sect can range from transfer method or to all the way through to traditional method, and so having it labeled the same thing, and German wine labeling, of course, at the best of times is quite difficult to understand for someone who knows little about it. So I definitely think that with the transfer method, with Riesling, it hits a price point that is a fantastic stylistically alternative to your Proseccos as well, and therefore the more traditional estates as well, offering a more traditional method less expensively than you can from Champagne as well. So I think we do quite well through a lot of independent wine merchants with strong German estate brands, own label sect, and rosé as well. Rosé sparkling is really been really popular, I think, recently. And so Lawson doing a Pinot Noir sect is become quite popular with sort of Lawson supporting independence.
Ruth, are we going to see you advising the wine show to have a segment on sect anytime soon?
It's a funny one, sect. Knowing more, having more experience in the last year or so with English sparkling, and the sparkling wine market's a sort of law into itself anyway. I think it's sort of it's price driven, and obviously I don't who knows if there's enough of a market to knock Champagne off its sort of all its sort of monopoly of it. So yeah, I mean, I think I can see how, I would imagine, I might be wrong, but actually I can have a question for the other panel members, like I would totally drink sort of be keen and be up for a sect by a producer I knew. I think they've got it because they've gotten into the market already. If you've got the big sort of famous historical cool names in Germany, whether as in a category itself, I don't know whether if I was setting up, if I had to be a winemaker in Germany, whether I would choose to be a sect producer over another type of wine producer. I don't know. I probably wouldn't go and buy. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know what the what the percentages of sect are in terms of the. Well, yeah, the predominant market.
Most of the sect drunk in Germany is not made from Riesling at all, and is mostly carbonated, and so the market domestically is incredibly different to anything that would be appreciated within the UK. So there lies a big difference, because as a producer you have to be a predominantly exporting producer to be able to charge a premium, because sect domestically is seen as such an inferior product.
Mm-hmm. There we go. I wasn't aware of that. So So I don't. Yeah, it's not. I don't know if I don't know. It's probably out of all the German wines. If I was stocking an independent shop or a wine list, writing a wine list, I don't think I've ever listed the sect. Not because I've got a bad. It's not because I've tasted lots and thought, oh, they're horrible. I just it's a sort of it's a tough. The shops and wine lists don't have a large, unless you're a champagne bar or a sparkling wine bar, they have a much smaller selection of sparkling than other wines, and there's other regions producing sparkling wine which I think are arguably easier to sell, or is more available and so on, but it's probably not what I would go to Germany for personally, but I may well be missing a whole load of joy out there.
Yeah, no, and I think you made a really valid point. You get that effect where, okay, you've got room for only so many sparkling wines on given outlets lists. So it's a little bit like, isn't it? Champagne tick, Prosecco tick, These days, more likely an English sparkling wine, tick. Oh, that's my 3 slots filled. So it's how you move up the sort of pecking order of getting your particular sparkling wine, be it sect, be it a, I don't know, Tassie Fizz, or whatever, obviously with some nod to the price point. So it becomes increasingly difficult where it's not a specialist list, as you say. So, but I think it sounds as if there's room to, there is room for those who are selling more esoteric selections to have some fun, perhaps buy the glass, etc. I mean, Colin, have you ever put sect on at all?
We have not, no, not that I can remember anyway. We possibly have years back, but no, not for a long time if we have. I suppose the story would be that the smart Germans got out of German sparkling wine production and moved to Champagne, didn't they, in the 19th century or whenever it was, and Heidsieck and Krug and things like that got their German accountants taking over. So I suppose that's the story that I would try and tell people, that there's always been a sparkling wine gene, I suppose, in the German wine story. So that's there's some heritage perhaps to trade on off of that, even if it is across the border a few miles.
I think there's not, because there isn't this sort of like the newer sort of sparkling wines, or not newer in old styles, but that we see becoming more popular now, people drinking Ancestral method and Pet Nats and things like that are cheaper than traditional method, not seen as not as serious, or Cremants or Blanquette de Limoux and whatever. They sort of come with this, or maybe in London or cities definitely seem to have gathered popularity, combined with the sort of lifestyle of these sort of like wine bars with small plates and kind of casual drinking. And again, I'm not sure if it'd be great to see more German wines in those environments that have that sort of experience and lifestyle added onto them, which makes people. I mean, I'm yet to be, there's murmurs of Piquette being the next big thing, and I'm yet to have one that's even remotely pleasurable. So, but people still drink it. So there's a lot of, there's definitely room for. There's obviously room for wines that aren't, it's not necessarily whether just because wines get drunk doesn't mean they're good. But so I think, but it's the effect of the kind of like cool factor, or the lifestyle, or the, the sort of atmosphere in which they're introduced to the consumer. And I don't think you just don't really see German sparkling anyway. You might, really. So
yeah, it's a little bit of although having said that, James Viner, not to contradict you at all, Ruth, I agree with what you're saying, but James Viner's made the point that Serious Sect is making stunning progress, and something I perhaps overlooked is that VDP Sect is a new category ratified in early 2021. So, and I see Eliot's nodding, so that can surely only help to sort of single out quality Sect, which is then presumably very useful for everyone in the trade, whether they be here or USA or back in Germany, to say, okay, it's underscored by a certain quality level. Here we go. This is where the quality bit is, because obviously we all know, as with so many categories, we could be talking, I don't want to name people, Bordeaux, whatever. There are rubbish. There are less good wines at the bottom level. No, let's call them out for that. There is a layer of rubbish, and then you can go right up to the sort of highest wines, basically. I'm aware of time, actually. I have a couple more questions that I really want to pose to you guys. So just quickly, and I don't know who would want to kick off on this. I could land you in it, Eliot, actually, but the new sort of classification, sort of straightening that out in Germany, is this a good or a bad thing? I mean, my understanding is that, looking to sort of transform the CDP wine classification systems into a sort of single system, making it easier to understand, ironing out various anomalies, and also possibly a quality pyramid specifically for dry wines. But with all this going on, and I should perhaps have become more up to speed before the session, but can you explain it to us simply, and whether it's a good or a bad thing in your opinion?
No, well, I think the main thing is where growers were allowed to declassify from, say, a Spätlese to a Cabernet. So we end up having wines that have been ripened to Spätlese, or even some cases Auslese level, and then being labeled as Cabernet because you wanted to bolster the quality, let's say, or visibility or intensity of Cabernets without it having to be picked at cabinet level, i.e. a little bit lighter, fresher, more vibrant. And I think it's really important to put an upper limit on what can be known as cabinet, so that we don't end up, and it becomes a very obvious style. So cabinet is cabinet, cabinet being one of the most unique styles of wine anywhere in the world. If a consumer is buying a cabinet, they know that it's going to be a cabinet, light, fresh, lower in alcohol, lower in sugar. Because if you see, let's say 10% on a cabinet and it ends up being 100 grams residual sugar because it's declassified Auslese, that's not the wine that you wanted to buy. You wanted to buy something that's sort of 20 grams residual and 10% alcohol. And I think putting an upper limit on those is really, really important. And then in terms of dry style, obviously, I think it's doing a bit moving towards Ersterlager and Grosses Gewächs or Grosser Lager is definitely a good thing as well. Although I think the VDP being this restrained of, you can only have one Grosses Gewächs wine from that single vineyard. Obviously, Ernie Lawson likes to break the rules and has 3 or 4 with his extended lease time for 24 months, 36 months, and that's illegal in the VDP's eyes, but Ernie just does it anyway. But I think allowing some sort of flexibility and therefore bringing in nuances in the dry classification system can only be a good thing. Although, of course, it does add to more confusion, but it then allows more dialogue. So the more confusion there is, the more engagement there is to be had between us as the wine trade and consumers. So explaining a German wine label, once someone understands what each element is of that label, they think, well, now I know everything that is needed to know from reading this label. And then it's very easy to get that nugget of piece of information and feel, oh, actually, I know something about German wine, therefore I feel a bit more comfortable, and it's something to tell my friends that, did you know this is this is that, and fantastic to take a bottle to a dinner party and discuss that, and therefore more engagement is and more discussion is allowed or is possible.
So thank you, Eliot, for that. That's very sort of clearly put. Colin, you were sort of smiling and nodding a little bit. Is there? I mean, does this help you? Does this help to open conversations, or is it just extra confusion? Nuggets of gold, or
yeah, it might put some people to sleep. I think there's the Brexit paradox, isn't it? That any attempt to cut bureaucracy results in more bureaucracy. I think is definitely been applied to German wine law over the years, hasn't it? So you just you do what you can, can't you? You know, when it comes to explaining these things, cabinet should be light and fresh and a little bit off dry. Trocken means it's dry, so take your choice from that. Really, is when it comes to selling the stuff, is what actually goes on in the winery is a different story. And any attempt to try and stop 100-gram residual sugar cabinets would be welcome from me. I think life is too short, isn't it, for these things? So long as we've got a kind of the front line when we're selling this stuff, we've got an understanding of what's in the bottle before we've tried it. That's the key thing, I think, really, rather than doing this for any consumer benefit who are coming to these things as a new consumer. I can't see it being particularly
excellent. Yeah, no, great. Good.
I would agree. It's more for the benefit of the trade as to what's happening, and then the reassurance we get. But it's going to take a long time, if any, to trickle down to the consumer end. And I'm aware of time, Andy, like you said, but I just wanted to pick up on the sect, because I saw the communication carrying on a bit on the chat. The only thing I would add is that there is room for it, very, very niche. There is room for it, but we found that premium sect, we only have one premium sect that we sell, it's almost if it's personally endorsed by the staff, then people would buy it. So no one is asking for it, but if you personally recommend it, people are happy and they come back for it.
They come back for what price does that sell at, Anna?
£25, so it's not cheap. It's 25, but it is
that's really
generally high quality. Yeah, and it's those people that really went on the buying trip that I was mentioning at the start. Is the people that have gone to the vineyard, they've seen it, and they've come back, and they are personally telling the customer, look, it's a lot of money you're parting with, but it's a cracking bottle of wine. And those people are coming back for it.
Yeah, That's very reassuring to hear. That's good to hear. Okay, one more question that I'm really keen to get in, and I'm aware of time, and both panel and audience actually. I wanted to ask about or ask for your advice actually, so we can feed something back. And I'm so putting you all on the spot a little. I think you all had pre-sight of questions, and it was my question about what you, as the panelists within your particular sort of sectors of the trade, what would you recommend for people running their businesses, buying wines for their businesses they work for, who are looking to sort of strengthen the German section of their wine list? So what advice would you have? Can we give some sort of takeaways as we go around? How would you advise someone constructing an ideal? It doesn't have to be huge. What do you actually need on the shelf to make it a proper category? What do you need to bring in? What sort of price points? Where do you need to go? Who shall I land with first? Colin, could you help with that?
Yeah, I think really you want to pick a style really of a story of German wine that you want to tell. Ruth made mention of the kind of natural end of the spectrum, the pet nats and things. I think that would be really, really interesting for a retailer to explore that kind of world of the wines. You know, thinking of like Stafflerhof that Model import, some of the things that Newcomer have, for instance, Rudolf Trossen, that kind of biodynamic end of the world. They're not cheap wines. Those are real serious classic winemakers' wines, and that's possibly one sort of story that I would love to see a retailer take a single-minded focus on. The other way is just to celebrate the diversity, isn't it, and to have a bit of everything from Germany. We didn't even mention Scheurebe or Silvaner today. I think Schuh should really be a big category over here. People should love that. If they love their kind of crisp Sauvignons, that's the exact wine that you could get people into a German wine mode on. So yeah, I think that's probably where I'd go. So take a single-minded approach to it, and follow your dreams.
And Anna, would this be the same for you? What could you or would you add to that?
Yeah, I would totally agree with Colin. Show the diversity. I would lead with the dry Rieslings and the various styles and price points of it, and then Spätburgunder or Pinot Noir, and then add everything else around it. I think it's important to show the diversity of it. Have that critical mass. You know, don't just bring 2 or 3 SKUs. Bring 10, 15, and make an impact.
That could work. Ruth, I mean, you're consulting to various places, and I know you said you haven't necessarily worked as much with German wine as maybe you'd liked, but any further thoughts for you? And I recognise this can get more difficult as we go around, which people have already covered quite a lot of ground, but any further advice you'd offer?
I would probably go down the throw as much on the shelves as possible, because it's underrepresented. I think I would say the average wine consumer would naturally know far less about the geography of Germany as well. Like if you showed them a map of France or Spain and said, where's Bordeaux, where's Burgundy, where's Provence, they'd probably know. If you said, where's all these regions, where are all the German regions, they wouldn't have a clue. They wouldn't know which mountainous, not mountainous, whatever. I know for, a sort of, just general wine consumer, maybe none of that's important in any country, but I think that sort of real connection with the place and the connection with the flexibility with food pairings is really important. And you can see where Colin is currently located, obviously, it's an epic country, which you just don't think about sort of that necessarily is going to have that kind of majesty and grandeur. I'd just like to quickly just say I very much agree with Eliot on his previous points about how we often talk about how complicated the classification system is and it puts people off and whatever, but I mean I very much agree with him that almost the more sort of complexities, it invites engagement, and I think dumbing it down, I'm very anti dumbing down anything in wine. Dumbing it down is one thing, talking about it in a open way with normal language is a totally different thing from dumbing it down. And I think yes, it does require a bit of sort of maybe reading a book, looking something up online, but that is what's so fascinating about wine as a whole, and extra fascinating about how German wines are structured. And once you've got your head around it, it gives you like a formula to understand the labels. It's like working out a little puzzle. I mean, I guess it's maybe how different people's brains work, but you know, Bordeaux, you can learn which are the first grapes, which is the second, the third, fourth. It's actually really simple. You just learn the structure, and then you can sort of, once you've got those rules and that structure in your head, you're independent to go and find your own way. And then there's all these little idiosyncrasies, like someone's done something with a bit of extra time on leaves. But for me, that's one of the amazing, beautiful sort of, you know, lovely things about wine as a subject that keeps me captivated. And I think that should be something that's celebrated. And Germany offers that in abundance. And it shouldn't be like, oh, it's the boring German classification system. You know, the words alone are brilliant. They're like this long. They're just, you know, those sort of compound words. So it's actually, you know, I think it's brilliant, and actually is, you know, with a small amount of concentration, it opens up a whole a whole world of wine that you can then be independent and understand yourself. It arguably a lot simpler than Burgundy, which is a patchwork of, you know, families and marriage and divorce and plots and clothes and walls and blocks and all this stuff that no one's quite sure where it starts or where it ends or who's related to who and whatever, you know. So I think it should be something celebrated and just to get your teeth into. And so but yeah,
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I love the way you've put all that, and it's to a degree, it's the kind of complexity that kind of, you know, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. And Germany just has all that kind of intrigue. Also, it's much simpler than Burgundy, I find personally. So it's kind of, I'm not sure that's the best way to sell it. If you think Germany's complex, take a look at Burgundy. But I get exactly what you're saying, Ruth. So Eliot, having listened to all. Yes, exactly. So Eliot, having listened to all your fellow panelists, just wondered if there's anything that you as something of a German specialist would or could add to that.
Well, as everyone was talking, I was trying to run through, if I was to pick sort of 6 or 10 wines from our portfolio of I think we have 240 odd SKUs in stock of German, so quite a lot. But I would say between that 10 to 15 price point, have a dry and a fruity style and a Pinot Noir, and then perhaps a other Burgunder style white wine from the same producer as the Pinot Noir, as the Spätburgunder, and then upsell everything. And so go up to a on the fruity style, have a Cabernet, and on the dry style, perhaps having a single vineyard dry wine from somewhere as well. Because I think Riesling is definitely one of those great varieties that you spend an extra £10 on the bottle and you can notice the value. The value is actually increasing on your £25 wine as opposed to your £15 or £12 wine. And then it depends how elaborate and expensive you want to go, putting up a £35–40 Spätburgunder, of course, and a Grosses Gewächs style white and red would be fantastic. But I think starting with those kind of basics, and perhaps always have a single vineyard Cabernet on pour, always in the fridge, as always. That would be my go-to.
Excellent. No, thank you. And I think where are we coming to? We're sort of hitting the hour, and I think we've covered a lot of ground, but hopefully we've thrown out some. I think perhaps this is one of the challenges for Germany. We're looking at sort of undiscovered potential, real value in terms of what you're just talking about, which is the exact opposite to cheap. It's getting you know, good value for every buck you put in. The quality of the wines, the diversity of the wines, the having a flagship variety which is perhaps unrivaled in terms of its reflection of terroir, window on the terroir. Just can't think of what you can say. You've got two of the most fantastic great varieties in the world as the lead varieties in Spätburgunder and Pinot Noir and Riesling. And then this whole host of, I don't really like to call them supporting acts because I'll be insulting quite a few winemakers, but literally the best supporting actors around them as well, you know. So there are just almost too many cues. So it's which do you pick? And I guess you pick, you know, something along the lines of what's going to suit your particular customer at a particular time. So we've had some really nice comments in the chat, actually. Sid Cross thanking you all for your insightful sessions and raising the profile of German Riesling. Well done, everyone. And Karen Jenkins, Karen High again is saying, light, fruity, attractive Mosel wines, perhaps in bracket whites, at good entry level price points, and relatively low alcohol. What's not to love? And I think that comes back to Ruth, what you were saying about, you know, just smashing some good value and you know, closer to entry level for Riesling kind of wines in the garden on a balmy afternoon or evening, you know, which is great. So I think hopefully we've whetted the appetite of our audience, and it's an ongoing story, isn't it? It's an ongoing conversation. But so anyone have any last final points they're burning to get off their chest, or comments about Germany? But I think we've covered the ground, and hopefully this has been a good and stimulating closing debate or discussion to the 2-day virtual Big G session, which has been absolutely fantastic. Personally, I've really enjoyed doing it. So thanks to Wines of Germany for delivering all of this and inviting Harpers to come along. And a big thank you to you, Eliot, you, Anna, Colin, and Ruth for joining me today. So and thanks all for tuning in and listening. So hopefully see you in person with a glass of Riesling or Spätburgunder in hand in the not too distant future. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much all. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye all.